Welcome to the Mass Historia podcast. Prepare for your weekly comedic education from our hosts. Tim, medieval enthusiast and engineering student.
This is like the best thing ever.
Dr. Tom, doctor of nuclear engineering.
I fear what comes next.
And Udo.
Everything that we normally do, that's nonsense and garbage.
Sit back, relax, and open your mind. It's time to get learned.
All right, everyone. Welcome to our so far unnamed history podcast. There have been a few suggestions for the show. Gamer News Party, welcome to the show. But we've had a suggestion of the history show name here, which is a pretty good suggestion. We had Hysterical History. We also had the Illuminati Illumination or Education Hour. I can't remember. I put that in a document and I closed that document. But if you have suggestions after watching this show of what you could name this show, please feel free to send them to me. I'm very interested.
Three morons talk about history.
Right, exactly. The Unqualified History Hour.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Right.
a doctor, thank you.
Well, yes, but you're not a doctor of history because history never gets sick.
Yeah, putting stitches in doesn't help with history.
Hey,
Angry Cicada says, the history show with Udo. It's a pretty good one. So, tonight, Dr. Tom and Tim shall join me, your host Udo, on a journey back to 1770s. We're going to be exactly. We're going to be discussing the fancy character from history that is, from what I've watched a lot of stuff on or read a lot of things on the Revolutionary War, and I don't know how this guy slips under the radar so much on a lot of the documentaries I watch and things like that. We're about to talk about John Paul Jones, and John Paul Jones is like he's the first American badass. Like,
yeah.
Straight up.
Yep.
He was a badass, the first American badass before America was a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. This John Paul Jones, right? He's going to be the first thing we ever cover on this podcast. I was originally going to do this episode as John Paul Jones and the Australian Emu Wars. But instead, I found too much content for John Paul Jones. So,
Because he's that
It's too
badass.
goddamn cool.
right? But let's just pop into a little bit about it. And we're going to be experimenting with a new way that this podcast works. But our story begins on July 6th of 1747 in Kirkcudbrightshire in southwest Scotland. It's a place you should remember because it becomes important again in the future. John Paul Jones was originally born John Paul Jr. He added Jones later in life to hide from law enforcement, and he was born on the estate of Arbigland in a small cottage near Kirkbean, to his father, who was a gardener, John Paul Sr., and to his mother, Jean McDuff. You guys ever heard of any of those places before?
Nope.
All of this stuff will become real important later in the story. And that was Kirkcudbrightshire and John Paul Jones adding a name to his name, but it was just John Paul at this time, right? So we're just talking about John Paul Jr.
Yeah.
So John Paul started out his maritime career at the age of 12 or 13. I was able to find data that led to both. So
Jesus,
yeah.
A 12-year-old be like, "Yar, I'm a pirate."
exactly.
Well, no, that was pretty common back then, having a
That's
cabin
true.
boy or something like that.
Right.
That's fair.
He started sailing out of Whitehaven, which is another place that you should remember because it becomes important again in the future.
I have heard of Whitehaven before, but I can't remember why.
John Paul Jones does some really cool shit there, but we won't get there for quite a while. But that's where he started. First time he ever set foot on a ship was in Whitehaven. This was in the northern English county of Cumberland, and he was an apprentice aboard the, and I'm not making this name up, the Friendship. Under one dumbass captain, Captain Benson.
Why does Captain Benson suck?
He sailed as a cabin boy on a ship to Virginia, where he visited his older brother William in Fredericksburg. He was a cabin boy after he did some apprenticeship stuff, right? There we go.
Still though, I maintain that the Friendship is a fucking sweet boat name. Like, could you imagine coming back and being like, "Oh yeah, oh your ship got sunk. Oh, that's terrible. Who did it? The Friendship."
It's like the first example of everybody who names their gamer profile like your mom or right. Cookies or something like that. Like, you were killed by grandma's cookies.
You were killed by diabetes.
Right, exactly. Okay, maybe Captain Benson didn't suck too bad. Maybe he did have a good idea. But
right.
So
got your back, Benson.
If that's our first example of trolling in history, that will not be the last one we cover today. There is many.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
So, question real quick. Dr. Tom, do you think you would have survived on a ship in the 1700s?
No, I would have run my mouth too much until they threw me overboard.
How about you, Tim? Do you think you would have made it?
What would I have been doing on said ship?
Well, I mean,
Dead.
Imagine that you would have been a man who wanted to be on a ship. So I mean, for not just all of a sudden Tim's taken out of the world and put onto a 1700s boat, but Tim grew up in the 1700s.
Yeah. Then yeah. If I grew up in the era.
Sven the Norwegian guy, thank you very much for those 20 bits.
On the boat, hell
that.
yes, I'd survive.
Okay, that's a fair argument.
Right.
I do like working with my hands and shit. Their mortality rates were horrific, though.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of it is just kind of just straight up a crapshoot.
That's an important thing to bring up. Dr. Tom, how old are you?
I am 30.
Tim, how old are you?
I am 22.
And
Liar.
I myself
plus 11.
Right. I myself am 35. The average life expectancy of people during that era was 36.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
And even less so if you served on a boat.
Wasn't a lot of the really short lifespan back then related to the horrific infant mortality they had?
Correct. It was terrible.
Yes and no.
But
I mean, I remember reading that it was like if you survived past like 5, your life expectancy shot up like 20 years.
Yeah. No, like if your chance of infant mortality was, I think, 1 in 3.
Yeah,
something like that.
What I saw while researching tonight's story was 40%.
Okay, so
in other words, fucked upedly high.
A little bit over 1 in 3.
But then even past that, penicillin was not a thing yet.
Yeah. I didn't have germ theory yet.
Anything like that. So, like appendicitis, you're dead.
Yeah.
A lot of the common diseases, you're dead.
Actually,
so,
I've had appendicitis. I'd be dead.
Yeah, it was exceptionally rare to have someone grow to quote unquote old age.
Whitley says that diabetes would have killed him a lot quicker.
You'd be surprised. Don't get a lot of sugar back in the 1700s.
All right. So, John Paul's seafaring adventures eventually took him, like many other sailors before him, into working in the slave trade. For several years, Paul sailed aboard a number of merchant and slave ships, including the King George in 1764 as the third mate, and the Two Friends as first mate in 1766.
Are you sure it wasn't two friendships?
The names seem to get a lot badder ass the closer you get to war. Like, like right now they're all like, I don't care if I scare anybody with my ship. Name it the Two Friends. Like, we got this.
And like war breaks out, and they're like, name it the Knife McStabberson.
Right. In 1768, he abandoned his prestigious position on the profitable Two Friends while he was docked in Jamaica. He found his own passage back to Scotland and then eventually obtained another position. However, the realities of human trafficking repulsed him, and he was returned to ship cargo duties. You know, he was a slaver for a while. Yep, he was a slaver for a while, but eventually he was like, this is really crap, so I'm just going to find my own way back from Jamaica to Scotland. And
which is no mean feat.
Right, exactly. He couldn't just purchase airfare at this time, right?
Yeah. I'm glad he realized it was fucked up.
Right. John Paul, his sailing career got a booster shot on his next trip aboard the brig John. another excitingly named ship, the John. Right?
Like, great if you got a poop.
In 1768, when both the captain and another officer suddenly died of yellow fever, Paul, they're all, oh shit, yellow fever, we're all fucked, right?
Right.
Paul managed to navigate the ship back to port, and as a reward for getting the ship and the crew back, the vessel's grateful Scottish owners made him the new captain of the John and gave him 10% of the current cargo. He was given 10% of their current cargo, and he led 2 voyages to the West Indies before anything else in his life went wrong. In 1770, John Paul had one of his crew flogged for disobedience, leading to accusations that his discipline was unnecessarily cruel. I was looking into it. The claims, they were initially dismissed, but it didn't help his reputation after word of what had happened had spread. John was arrested for his involvement in the man's death.
Who?
Right? But it turns out that he died of yellow fever as well. Like, so he flogged him, and then the guy died of yellow fever. So, like, the doctors were able to confirm, right, that he in fact did die. But he was arrested for involvement in the man's death. He was imprisoned in Kirkcudbright Tolbooth. Tolbooth is the name of a type of prison. It's not actually a toll booth, but Tolbooth. Yeah. He eventually made bail, but the negative reputation from the event began to haunt him. It later came to light that the death was linked to yellow fever, but the man who died was not a normal sailor, but in fact, an adventurer from an influential Scottish family. Does this not sound like the beginning of the greatest D&D character ever written?
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's like he had a little bit of a problem with getting a little too rough on a member of his crew. The guy died of sickness, but in fact, he was a rich man and everyone hated you. Like, leaving Scotland, John Paul commanded a London-registered vessel named, and I'm not making these up,
Hank.
Betsy. It was pretty close, right?
Close.
That's like, Betsy's like the female version of Hank. Like, I mean, it's
Right.
pretty close. A West Indiaman mounting 22 different guns, engaging in commercial speculation in Tobago for a year and a half. This eventually came to an end when John killed a mutinous crew member named Blackton with a sword in a dispute over wages.
Oh my God.
John Paul Jones claimed that it was in self-defense. Years later, Benjamin Franklin described the incident, but he was not willing to be tried in an admiral's court where the family of the first victim had been influential. He felt compelled to flee Fredericksburg, leaving his fortune behind with the additional purpose of arranging the affairs of his brother, who had recently died, without leaving any immediate family. So,
are they sure the Muniz guy didn't die of yellow fever?
It's very possible. I think that everyone witnessed this part, right? I think that he couldn't be like, he just like pull his sword out of the guy. Yellow fever! It's everywhere!
He came at me with those crazy yellow fever eyes.
Right? If I was John Paul...
I had to put him down.
Right, if I was John Paul Jones, I would have had yellow fever inscribed into my sword. Right?
Right?
Like the friendship machete.
Yeah.
Or no, the kindness machete.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, exactly. Killed him with kindness. But he died of yellow fever. Stabbed into his face 4 times. Right?
Yep, yellow fever got him. Just like it got the last 6 guys.
Gosh darn it, right?
Gonna have to cut a notch in the handle of my yellow fever.
Exactly. Slung it in my old belt. All right. So, at that time, John then assumed the surname Jones, in addition to his original surname. There's a long-held tradition in the state of North Carolina that John Paul that other people adopt the name Jones in honor of Willie Jones of Halifax. Willie Jones was an American statesman. At his own request, he was buried in an unmarked grave. In his will, he asked that he be buried beside his small daughters that had also died. And further mandated that no priest or other person is to insult my corpse by uttering any impious observations over my body. Let it be covered sunny and warm, and there is an end. My family and my friends are not to mourn my death, even with a black rag. On the contrary, I give my wife and 3 surviving daughters, Anna, Maria, Sally, and Patsy, a Quaker-colored silk to make their habits on the occasion. So, this guy, that's Halifax, right? So
that's pretty goddamn cool.
Yeah. So Jones thought that guy's badass. I'm gonna be a Jones too, right? I need a new name.
Right.
This works out well. Just call me John Paul Jones, right? And thus, we shall refer to him as John Paul Jones for the rest of now. Until, of course, there are other changes in his name, and we will need to change our speaking from there. Tim, if you had to change your name to evade the feds, what would you choose? Right? It's a neat one, right? And
is this in a modern context?
Well,
or in a ye old context.
John Paul Jones was running from feds for being chased by the Royal Navy. What would you pick? Yeah. I mean, I guess technically you could either put yourself in 1774 or you could do nowadays. Either way is fine.
I think either way, I'm gonna go with Caleb Johnson.
Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
Caleb, because I'm used to going by that name through another thing that I do.
Yeah.
So I'm already used to answering to it documentation with that name on it, at least not official documentation. And then Johnson, just because it's a very, very common surname.
That's a good one. How about you, Dr. Tom?
Okay, my goofy answer was going to be Daniel Michael Zenifrex.
Gotcha.
Because it's a stupid name. But, actually, no. First name, so being practical, I think first name Tristan would be good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the most common name, but it's not the rarest, and from LARP, I'm very used to answering to it.
Right.
But in I would say in a 1774 context, where you can get away with going from John Paul Jr. to John Paul Jones and have that somehow work.
Right.
I don't even I wonder if this John Paul Jones guy
Hi,
John
Molassie.
Paul
Thank you
Jr.
very much for that raid. I hope you guys like.
So good.
Oh man, I'd like to change my answer.
All right.
If I had to change my name to evade the feds, I think I'd have to go with
Yeah. Some guy who doesn't use that name anymore. It's that name's just available, you know. But I think that I would definitely change my name to Drake Dragonfire Shingledecker, because then everybody would go after the famous Drake Dragonfire Shingledecker.
Yeah.
I apparently copied that slide, but I don't need to. All right, so now I am going to read, because the donation came through, I am going to read through this next lesson part with a voice. So, at this point, for the time being, our story moves moves to the colonies. America became, quote, the country of his fond election. In 1774, he arrived in Fredericksburg, Virginia. As a Mason, he met many influential Virginia revolutionaries. Under the name John Jones, he planned to become a Virginia farmer after his brother William died and left him nothing. Of course, none of that ended up working out, or our story would be done here. But there are far, far more awesome things in store for John Paul Jones. Thank you very much for the laughter there. I appreciate that.
Absolute worst.
I know. I do know.
Best.
Yes. But that's, I mean, Jones left for Philadelphia shortly after settling in North America to volunteer his services at around the year 1775 to the newly founded Continental Navy. He had fallen in with the revolutionaries that he met, and he wanted to help. And if there was one thing that John Paul Jones is good at, since he was 12, that's serving aboard a ship, right?
Right.
Hell yeah.
So, natural fit for him. Is this right? Scottish-born lad. Natural. Hey, this Scottish-born lad kicked out of Ireland, or kicked out of England for killing a mutinous dog.
It was yellow fever.
Right, exactly. Yellow fevering a mutinous dog. So, due to John Paul Jones having a lot of experience at sea and having captained his own share of ships, Jones was made first lieutenant. During his time, the Navy and the Marines were just then being established formally, and suitable ship officers and captains were in high demand. Jones' potential would have been gone unrecognized if it were not for the endorsement of Richard Henry Lee, who knew of Jones' abilities. Richard Henry Lee was an American statesman from Virginia, best known for one little thing called the Lee Resolution, which happens to be the motion that called for the Second Continental Congress to vie for independence from Great Britain. So,
that's dope.
Yeah. Kind of a big deal, Richard Lee was, right? Yeah. So this guy went to bat for Jones because he's all like, I've seen this guy in the ocean. I know what he can do. We should get this guy going. So that's how he ended up as a first lieutenant.
He's just like, I don't want to fucking die of yellow fever. Come on.
Right? Exactly. Right? Richard Henry Lee's just like, this guy, he'll yellow fever anybody who crosses his path.
Get this guy out of the ocean where he's not gonna hit anybody with yellow fever.
The first t-shirt for this podcast is going to be a hand-drawn cutlass with the words yellow fever across the front. I like it. I like it a lot. All right. Jones, his first ship that he was going to be serving the colonies aboard was a converted 24-gun frigate named Alfred. I am not making up these names.
Oh my God. What is with this dude and abysmal ship names?
So far,
Clearly.
he's served on the John, the Betsy, the Friendship, and Alfred. Like,
wait, what about two friends?
And the two friends. That's right.
So I can tell you why he's been serving on such horrible named ships, because most ships that time were horribly named. Ship naming conventions is it has to be unique. And so all the stupid names, like the Alfred, those went early. So he was serving on a ship that had been around for a bit. The reason we get really dumb, esoteric names these days is all of the stupid ship names have already been taken. Like, I can't make a ship and name it the Alfred.
I swear to God, though, if we get to the end of this story and he doesn't have the HMS Yellow Fever, I'm gonna be so upset.
Right?
Well, we'll see. So he was the first lieutenant on the Alfred, and he was the first person in history to hoist the Grand Union flag on a continental warship.
That's
so,
dope.
Yeah. He hasn't even done anything yet, and he's already reached a legendary status, right? Like, we still have, this is slide 17 of 51, and he's already accomplished a legendary feat. Fun fact, the USS Alfred was formerly named the Black Prince, which was a much fucking cooler name than the Alfred.
Why the fuck would you change your ship name? As I spit everywhere in outrage. Why would you change your ship name from the Black Prince to Alfred?
I think it was political.
Right. The Black Prince was a merchant vessel owned by Willing, Morris and Company, and they were still trading with Britain in early 1774 before the rest of the colonies were in open revolt. And while the ship was in Britain, it then smuggled back information that led to the capture of 2 unmarked British trade vessels that were full of military supplies. Yeah. So when this ship came back and became part of the Navy, it was one of the 4 original ships in the Continental Forces. So, yeah.
So the reason they changed it from the Black Prince is the Black Prince is a direct reference to the son of Edward III, who was a commander in the British Navy.
Okay.
And so a United States ship during the War of Independence is probably not going to carry the name of one of the most celebrated English commanders who also happened to be a crown prince.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I'll fine.
Also, throughout this entire, we'll be seeing lots of ships being retrofitted from being merchant vessels to warships, because the U.S. didn't have any warships, or the Continental Army had no warships. So they renamed them every time. Okay. It might have also been, part practice to just pick a new name.
Yeah.
But no, thanks for that info, Tim. I did not know that part.
That is super cool.
That is super awesome. Yeah. All right. The next part. On Jones' first major mission with the Continental Navy, the fleet was expected to cruise along the coast, but was ordered instead by Commodore Essex Hopkins, who becomes important over the next couple of slides, to sail for the Bahamas, where Nassau was raided for military supplies. Nassau was currently held by British forces at the time.
So Nassau was raided by America?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The fleet was successful in the raid. They got a ton of stuff out of it. They raised Nassau, did everything they were supposed to be doing. But on their way back, they encountered a British packet ship. A packet ship is an intel vessel. So essentially, it's supposed to be a fast little vessel that gets intel back and forth from one place.
Yeah, basically
Okay, yeah.
the naval equivalent to a courier.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like in a day and age without phones and shit,
Right.
you gotta get info around.
The Continental Navy encountered the British dispatch boat called the HMS Glasgow. And the Glasgow managed to escape the fleet of 7 ships, although it did suffer significant damage. The battle is considered at that point, the Battle of Block Island is considered to be a victory for the British because the British made it out. The captains of the Continental Fleet were criticized for their actions during the battle, and one was eventually dismissed as a result. Commodore Hopkins was also criticized heavily for other actions pertaining to the crews, including how they distributed the seized goods, and he was also dismissed as a captain. He was forced to serve as a commodore off of a ship. It kind of was a side grade for him that ended up being a big upgrade, because Hopkins eventually then became the commodore.
Right.
He ended up as commander-in-chief. So this left the Navy with a couple of openings for captains, right?
Yeah.
Jones has been
Step
a captain
in, John
before,
Paul Jones.
right? So from first lieutenant, Jones was then assigned to the command of the USS sloop Providence. First time we get a ship that doesn't sound like it's stupid, right?
Right.
like I'm okay with the Providence, right?
Yeah, that's all right.
And that was on the 10th of May, 1776. Congress had recently ordered the construction of 13 new frigates for the American Navy. So it'll be the first time they were going to have warships built to be warships.
Right, as opposed to other ships that are repurposed.
Right?
Yeah.
One of these warships was supposed to be commanded by Jones. He was promised that he was going to get a frigate. So in exchange for his prestigious command, Jones accepted commission aboard the Providence in time. And during the 6-week voyage that he then took to Nova Scotia, using the Providence, Jones captured 16 British prize ships.
Holy
Right. This is the first time he's gotten to captain for this whole thing, right?
Right.
So
hey, I'm a captain now. Let's raise some shit.
Right? Let's just go win this war, right? Yeah, exactly. 6
Enough
weeks.
pussyfooting around.
Right, exactly. 6 weeks he captured 16 ships.
He was capturing like a ship every 3 days. What
Right?
the hell?
Right?
Yeah. Get wrecked.
Holy Christ.
And inside of that, he also did a full-out raid on Kenso, which was another British fort. Go ahead.
And he's doing this in the Providence?
In the Providence, yes.
He's doing this in a sloop.
Yes.
That's like the smallest of the ocean-going vessels.
Right. He's in a wee baby ship, and he just goes out and just tears ass. Like,
Books up.
He is basically bringing a pistol to a fully automatic fight.
and winning. Right.
Jesus.
So, his next command after that came as a result of Commodore Hopkins' orders to liberate hundreds of American prisoners who were forced into labor in coal mines in Nova Scotia. And also, he had a mission to raid British shipping while he was doing it. On November 1st of 1776, he set sail once again on the Alfred. This time to carry out his mission, because they need to give him something bigger than a sloop.
Right.
In order to...
No, they don't.
Right.
See what that dude does with a fucking sloop? Jesus.
He's surgical with that there
It's like,
sloop.
oh, you
He's
want to
gotta-
give me a brigantine? Fuck it, whatever.
He's got to carry back some captives.
Right.
Give me
Yep.
a dinghy.
We'll put 200 men on this dinghy. I'm John Paul Jones. I'm about to go yellow fever, half of the British Navy. Although winter conditions prevented freeing the prisoners. He was unable to free the prisoners. So this is the first time we've seen him fail. It won't be the last, but it's not something he does often.
Can't win them all.
When you say winter conditions, do you mean like the seas were too rough for him to safely assault the
Yeah.
beach, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But instead, he turned around and captured Mellish, which was a vessel carrying a vital supply of winter clothing that was intended for General John Bourguignon's troops in Canada. So, he was able to help defeat John Bourguignon in Canada from the ocean.
Right.
All of that, everything that we've done so far, everything we've talked about so far, happened in 6 months. 6 months since he stepped foot on the Alfred.
Right.
For the first time.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Dude, don't fuck around.
Nope.
You got shit to do.
So, despite his success at sea, Jones had one problem.
Yeah.
He was a salty bastard. His personality was not considered all that subservient, and his ambitions graded on those above him.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be the exact same way. Bitch, I just captured 16 ships in 6 weeks, destroyed British shipping such that it helped you win another battle
Mm-hmm.
in all of this in less than 6 months. Yeah, I'm a badass.
Right.
Get out of my way. Shit
With the
to
sloop.
do.
With the
Like,
sloop.
he
Yeah.
captured a small fleet with the fucking sloop.
Right?
Yeah. If anybody doesn't know, sloops are tiny. They're like, what? Actually, I don't know the numbers. How big would you say sloops get in length? Like 20, 30 feet?
A little bit more than that.
Yeah, 30,
but not
40.
much.
Yeah.
Still, they're like the smallest Navy warship as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, they're a one-masted with
Yeah.
a fore and aft sail and a jib.
How big
So,
do galleons get?
He's maybe
Like,
gonna have 4 cannon on each side.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But okay. So his personality graded on those above him, and his ambitions were really, really, really rough. I messed up the phrasing on that sentence, but you guys get it. In December of 1776, he began a feud with Commodore Hopkins, as you guys remember from a few slides ago. At this point,
Oh no.
this is the point when he was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Navy. So,
Oh, no.
Jones believed that Hopkins was hindering his advancement by talking down all of Jones's campaign plans and generally undermining anything that Jones did. Jones was seeing a lot of success, and Hopkins still hadn't lived down the failures of the Battle of the Block.
Mm,
So, if you've got an underling who looks like they're doing better than you, what do? You send him to Siberia. But that's what they would do if we were Russians. This is the U.S. You're about to find out what happened.
So,
Go.
real quick, just to re-clarify, did a little bit of research while we were talking. Sloop is 35 to 65 feet long,
Mhm.
carries six cannons per side,
Excellent.
can hold about 75 people at max capacity.
wow.
Dr. Tom, if you got to name a ship, what would you name it? Now we've been talking about all these ship names, right?
Oh.
Be a good one. Tim, this question's coming to you next.
Right.
I kind of like the idea of naming the ship the Hammerhead.
The Hammerhead? It's pretty good.
Like, especially if it was lighter on broadsides and had as many, in particular, front guns as possible. It's chase people and shoot them in the back.
Right. Oh, and
Hammerhead.
one point of note on Tim's note earlier, where it said that you couldn't, you can't name ships the same thing unless the other one has sunk. You totally can name your ship after a ship that has been sunk. They're in.
Yes, you
Yep.
can.
Yep. All right, Tim, do you have one?
So I do, and it depends on the type of ship.
Mhm.
If it's a small ship, like a sloop or something like that, where it's designed to go fast,
Yeah.
I'd probably name it either Hermes or Mercury. If it was like a big giant warship, where I'm going out and I'm gonna duke it out, probably gonna name it the Anvil.
The Anvil, nice.
Yeah.
And then they.
And-
Hammerhead and Anvil.
Yep.
And this is gonna be weird to some people, most people probably. But if it was a Viking ship, I would name it Hrafnholm.
All right.
What's Hoffenholm mean?
Hrafnholm in Old Norse literally means home of the raven.
That's cool.
Gotcha. I am definitely going to. I've been obsessed with this ship name ever since our buddy who is in the chat right now. I don't remember what he's on here. Not Horatio. He's in our Dungeons and Dragons group, and we're playing a pirate campaign, and we had to name a ship. He had a fantastic name.
He did.
We ended up naming it something different for different reasons. Our ship is named the Wendigo right now because we're trying to convince like merchants that we eat people. It's fucking funny.
I was gonna say, do you guys eat people?
We eat monsters. If we kill a monster, we eat it. That's how it works. But
yeah.
The name that he came up with was the Rude Gesture.
Mm-hmm.
What's that off the? It's the Rude Gesture. God damn it!
Those sons of bitches.
All right. Fun fact: 150-ton ship required 200 workers, and the progress could take up to 60 to 100 days.
What do you mean the progress?
Or sorry, process. The process itself.
Oh.
Yeah, the process of building a boat was 60 to 100 days. That's actually much faster than I thought a boat took. I was thinking the boat was going to take like 6 months.
At the same time, that is a massive work crew.
It is. But when your entire town is the town of we build a boat, like it works out, right? It
turns out if you got 250 people working on 100-foot to 150-foot boat, it's not going to take that long.
This is a piece of
but that's like doing the math offhand and assuming a 40-hour work week, which really isn't that accurate, but whatever. I'm gonna hand wave it. That's like I think about 50 to 80,000 work hours.
Right. Something for you guys to remember. This date. Keep this data in your head as we continue through John Paul Jones' reign of fucking terror. Like
how much fucking people's time and effort he fucking murdered.
Well, at this point, he stole up to 1,600 days worth of ships.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is where our story starts to get really interesting. So Jones was denied his brand new frigate. The whole one that I told you guys that he was told he was going to be able to... Yeah. So he was denied...
Shit.
Right.
Fucking that Commodore. I blame that. Give that Commodore the yellow fever.
Yep. Yellow fever, that ass. So Jones was then given command of another sloop. The USS Ranger. This was if the Commodore... Right. Go ahead.
I was gonna say if you wanted to keep this man from earning himself for some promotions, giving him sloops is clearly the wrong answer.
Right, exactly. If you wanted to keep John Paul Jones down, don't give him a sloop.
I will point out his ship names are getting better and better and better.
Right?
Yep.
So now he's on the Ranger, right? So on June 14th of 1777, he was given the Ranger, which was also just to add more legendary spice to this Herculean character. That was the same day that the Stars and Stripes flag was adopted.
That's cool.
So he got a new ship named the Ranger, and America got a flag.
America!
The Ranger, which was initially called the Hampshire, as far as I can tell, Jones chose a different name for it. I couldn't find any reason why the Hampshire was renamed. It wasn't refitted. This was a sloop of war. It was an actual, warship. It was originally built by James Hackett, a master shipbuilder, at the shipyard of John Langdon, and is now called Badger's Island in Kittery, Maine. Captain John Paul Jones was in command. Jones was given vague orders, and he was kind of written off by command at that point. They figured Jones couldn't be that much trouble for them due to the fact that they gave him a smaller ship, which is obviously wrong. It was, he's proven this before. The vague orders that he was given was to assist the American cause in whatever way possible.
Oh, so okay.
Right?
It's like, dude, we've seen what you can do. Here's a sloop back, cause yeah, and do it to it, buddy.
At that point, Jones did what he thought was going to be best. If he was going to help out the American cause, he would take the war to the British. The Ranger...
Did he go to Britain?
The Ranger...
In a sloop.
In a sloop. The Ranger set...
Jesus Christ!
The Ranger set sail for France on the 1st of November, 1777, carrying military intelligence to the commissioners in Paris. On the voyage over, the Ranger casually raided 2 British trade ships. Arriving at Nantes, France, on the 2nd of December, Jones sold all the loot that they had picked up and delivered news to the victory at Saratoga to the one and only Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, someone's moving up in the world.
Right?
Hell yeah.
Jones and Franklin developed a very close relationship. Jones had long admired Franklin. Franklin and the other American commissioners in France were working with Jones to try to get him a new ride. So Jones was working with the American commissioners in France to try to get a new boat. The L'Indienne, which was a French-designed frigate built in Amsterdam. But unfortunately, Jones was going to be denied another frigate by British political pressure on France, who at that point had not officially allied with the U.S. So Jones was left again without a command and an unpleasant reminder of his stagnation in Boston from late 1776 until early 1777.
This is some bullshit.
Right?
Yeah.
During that time, Jones was just using the Ranger to harry British trade ships in the Irish Sea. But Jones had better plans.
Oh no. Oh no.
Right?
I fear what comes next. I feel like this man is like the pre-MacGyver. It's like
right?
He took a sloop and 4 packets of tea and captured the entirety of Britain.
Right?
Right.
On February 6th, 1778, France signed the Treaty of Alliance with America, formally recognizing the independence of the new American Republic. 8 days later, Captain Jones' Ranger became the first American vessel to be formally saluted by the French, with a 9-gun salute from Captain Lamont Piquet's flagship. Jones wrote, "I accepted his offer, all the more for, after all, it was recognition of our independence and in the nation." Emboldened, emboldened by all that has happened, Jones set out to execute his new master plan, to terrify the ever-loving crap out of the British on their own soil.
Oh my god.
It gets better from here. It gets better from here.
I can't take it. I can't take it, okay?
On April 10th, 1778, Jones set sail from Brest, France, for the western coast of Britain.
Taking the fight to them.
Right? Now, officially, he was just going to be doing some more of the same, assisting America and robbing merchant ships. But 7 days later, he persuaded his crew to participate in an assault on none other than Whitehaven, the town where his maritime career began.
Oh my god!
The very same port that he left at age 12 or 13. I'm still unable to verify whether or not it was 12 or 13.
12 and a half. Just
All right.
kept getting worse.
So Jones had operated in Whitehaven for quite a long time before he left for the colonies. And so he knew that place inside and out. He knew the defenses, when the best time was to strike, and where the most effective targets would be located. The crew agreed. Oh, go ahead.
Side note, did a little bit more research while we were talking. It is absolutely pronounced breast, but with a very heavy R, almost a rolled R. So
Breast.
Yeah.
Excellent. The crew agreed to Jones' plans, but the attempt was foiled by one thing that Jones could do nothing about: weather.
Weather strikes again?
Yep. Heavy winds pushed Jones and his ship back towards Ireland, where they took advantage of the time and just did some more interrupting of British shipping. Tim, do you get seasick?
I get very seasick.
That's definitely something that I was thinking about the entire time I'm looking at all of this stuff about ships. I'm like, I wonder if I would get seasick. I've never been on a ship long enough to find out. I've only been on a couple hours of
I went on a charter boat for ocean fishing, and we had like 15-foot swells that day. And
that would be rough.
Yeah, and on a small boat like we were on, it was like a 25-foot boat on 15-foot swells. I was so desperately sick the entire time. The funny part is, like, 3/4 of the way through the trip, I was sitting in the cabin just miserable, going, well, I guess if I'm gonna be sick, I might as well fish.
Right.
And then proceeded to just throw up over the side with a fishing rod in my hands, and eventually caught like the best fish on the boat. Like, I was the only one to catch a lingcod that day. Everyone else caught shitty rockfish.
Right.
What's a lingcod?
It's similar to a halibut, but
okay, nice.
Yeah, it's a really tasty fish.
Nice.
But I don't know how I would do on a larger boat in calmer seas.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to test to find out.
That's cool.
How about you, Dr. Tom? Do you know if you get seasick?
I haven't been on a ton of boats. Like I've gone sailing with my dad a couple of times, but because my understanding of seasickness is pretty much motion sickness.
Right.
Yes.
I don't get motion sick almost. Like I can read in a car on like twisty, winding roads without a problem.
Gotcha.
I almost never get motion sick.
Then yeah, you probably won't get too seasick.
Yeah, that's my thinking. That I probably wouldn't.
So, for those of you who are keeping score, a fun fact: John Paul Jones has robbed, seized, or sunk 25 ships by this point in the 2 years that he has been serving in the Continental Army, including the times that he was forced to not do anything, the times that he didn't have a ship. Those types of times, it would be worse had they just let him go. I am sure of it, right?
Yeah, if they just given him a frigate and said, have at it, boy.
Right?
I feel like this dude like set a quota for himself of like must sink one ship per month.
Right? Exactly. I'm going to be this badass, right?
I haven't met my quota.
Right? So during the raids near the coast of Ireland, he found an interesting piece of information. There was a Royal British Navy warship at anchor off of the coast of Carrickfergus in Ireland. The HMS Drake. Which sounds like a badass ship, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, just the name itself.
Shingle
right.
Decker.
The HMS Drake Dragonfire Shingle Decker.
Right.
So,
and based on the way this narrative is going, I'm pretty sure it's going to sound like a really great shipwreck.
Right.
It caught yellow fever. I don't know what to
say. Now, at this point, Drake had never taken on a British Navy ship. He has only found British merchant ships.
He's only taken on merchants.
Yeah, and it's not that he wouldn't. He just hasn't come across them yet.
Right.
In
Turns
British
out the
waters.
Really fucking big.
Right. In British waters.
Had the chance to whip their ass yet.
They had fought British Navy ships in colonial waters, but not in British waters yet. Unfortunately, when the attack against the Drake took place, which was just after midnight, the mate responsible for dropping anchor to halt the Ranger right alongside of the Drake misjudged the timing in the dark. Jones claims that in his memoirs that the man was drunk. Other sources,
and then died of yellow fever.
Right. Other sources say that he was a mutinous crew member that did not want to go into the fight.
That's some bitch.
So Jones cut the anchor cable and ran. Fed up and with the wind shifted in his favor, Jones and the Ranger once again recrossed the Irish Sea to make the attempt at raiding Whitehaven again.
God damn it. Oh, gotta hit the old home turf.
The raiding of the Drake was 4 days after the failed attempt to attack Whitehaven. He makes it back 3 days from then, so 7 days after his first time he came by, he gets his chance again.
Jesus, and they're just like, dude, please,
right?
Please just go away, not again.
He is starting to gain a bit of fame in British waters. People are talking about the fact that there is infamy. There's a U.S. captain around, and everyone's like, no, we don't believe it. It's got to be somebody else. And then other people are all like, I don't know what's going on. Jones was pulling some shifty shit, though, as we'll figure out when he goes back for the Drake.
He was a shifty, salty.
Yeah. Jones led the assault on Whitehaven with 2 boats full of 15 men each, just after midnight on April 23rd, 1778. The plan, right? Jones's plan. Set fire to and sink all of Whitehaven's ships in the harbor.
Jesus!
Which was about
people, we got this.
200 to 400 wooden vessels, and consisted, right? Aim for the stars and you'll hit the trees. Right.
We got 30 men. We got this.
Right. And consisted of a full merchant fleet and many coal transporters. Phase 2, terrorize the townspeople by lighting further fires.
What made coal important? Blacksmithing?
Everything.
Yeah, that's your heat.
Yeah, it was like it was gasoline today. You had to have coal.
Okay, I was thinking they would just done wood fire heating.
One of the boats was commanded by a Continental Marine lieutenant, and the other by none other than John Paul Jones himself. The Marine commanded boat was sent to the docks to begin setting fires. Meanwhile, Jones and the 15 men with him attacked the fortification that defended the harbor.
That's a nice castle.
We got this.
Right?
I want that fucking castle.
They snuck up on the fortification without any incident and scaled the walls of the garrison by standing on each other's shoulders.
Fuck is in a barrel?
Right? So they literally stood on each other's shoulders and got over a wall.
Oh,
right. Do you have any data on that fortification? You said it was a garrison, but like how big of a garrison?
I don't have any data on that.
Okay.
Right.
I swear to God, if I ever play a pirate in D&D, I'm naming it John Paul Jones.
Right?
Right.
100%.
Right? Inside, they found the entire population of the fort asleep in their bunks. We need to cover an important fact here to explain why this happened. As of that very moment, right? This was the first time that Britain had been successfully attacked on its own soil in 700 years.
Oh, so these were a bunch of dudes who were
They
like...
were so complacent.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They're just like, oh, yeah, it's home defense. Or nobody's going to...
This small port...
No one
right.
going to show up.
This small port was nestled safely inside of the patrols of the British Royal Navy, the greatest navy in the world, and the thought of being invaded was as far from their minds as possible. The fort surrendered without even a single shot being fired.
Well, yeah, they didn't want to get yellow fever.
I feel like John Paul Jones was actually just like secretly a carrier patient for yellow fever.
Right.
His whole life, just everybody around. Yellow fever.
So the guys with John Paul Jones spiked the town's defensive guns. So so spiking involves driving nails into the holes of the cannons that are used to be able to ignite the powder inside.
Oh, so you basically make them completely inoperable.
You fuck these cannons. Those cannons are ruined. There's
not,
no
like, pry the nails
no, because you put it past the point of where prying is an option.
Okay.
You have just ruined these things.
Mhm.
They need to be melted back down and made into new cannons.
Well,
Jesus.
no, that doesn't even work because they're cast iron.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
can't recast.
You-
Those are just
You push
hunks of
them
metal.
into the ocean and you forget
Yeah,
about
wait.
them.
Why can't you recast cast iron?
because once cast iron has been cast, it
Yeah.
you can't really melt it back down.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, basically, as soon as it's become cast,
Yeah.
that iron is now. As soon as you do anything else, it's super brittle.
Yeah. Yeah, cast
So,
iron is turbo
You
brittle.
changed basically the chemical compound or the chemical structure of the
Oh,
iron.
is it the
into a
crystalline structure
compound
with the
that you-
carbon?
Yeah, that you can't
Okay.
break apart.
Right.
I actually had to review that like a week ago. A bunch of the stuff of iron carbon forms, like martenite and austenite and stuff,
Right.
or austenite.
Gamer News
I'll shut
Party
up.
says, who would win, best artillery or a Naily boy?
Really, boy, it is so easy to break
Right.
things.
Jones and his men then retreated back to the longboats, hoping to meet up with the second group. When they got there, the second group had not at all accomplished their mission.
Those cowards.
Yeah, because JPJ wasn't there.
Right? The second...
JPJ.
right?
My
The
dog JPJ.
JPJ, yellow fever.
Holy fuck!
This t-shirt is just writing itself. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
So the second group's lantern had gone out, and they had no other way of lighting fires,
Oh my god!
It's hard to light a fire without fire.
right? So they
Fair.
did the most logical thing that they could think of and got pissed drunk. You see, the second group thought that it would be a good idea to find another light in the one place that's always got fire, the local tavern.
Brilliant. and they just stopped for one pint, and one pint turned into two.
Right? So,
Oh my fucking
right?
god! They're all just like, you know what? We failed our mission, and you know we're gonna die of yellow fever, so
Yep.
we might as well get drunk.
we're getting fevered super hard. JPJ's Yellow Fever, the #1 album, 1778, Complete Fire. Amazing. Jones showed up and began busting heads. He rallied his
Yeah.
men back to work, and they
He's
did.
like, I got a spare lantern, you fucks.
Right? They did manage to light one boat on fire.
Yeah.
They chose to light the Thompson on fire, as it was a
Not the
brand
Tom.
new shit. It was brand,
Not the Tom.
right? It was a
Get wrecked.
brand new ship, and it was carrying a volatile load of coal.
Mm.
So they thought that this might let the fire do the work for them and light the rest of the boats on fire. You know, if you set the whole harbor on fire, boats aren't going to make it out very well. In the darkness and confusion, one of the crew of one of the British ships saw Jones and his men at the Thompson, and he ran to the town and set off the fire alert. I assume that this was a bell or a bunch of people screaming, "Oh God, fire." One of the two.
Right.
I wasn't able to find out what exactly a fire alert was, but
It was probably a bell.
right. This caused a large amount of people to head straight to the harbor and
Right.
straight towards the outnumbered Americans.
Oh no.
So Jones and his men ran back to the boats and slowly rowed away, fearless of reprisal, because they had spiked the town's only defenses.
Uh-huh.
So essentially, these Americans get to sit there in this boat and be all like, ha, ha, ha.
Oh, it's that you shoot a cannon, you can't.
Right.
Fucking... God, this is a D&D campaign.
Right?
100%.
Although
Jesus.
they were able to stop the fire and the physical damage to the Thompson was minimal, this had a massive effect on British morale. It proved
Oh, I bet.
that the British were vulnerable on their own shores.
Yeah.
Therefore, causing them to have to pull back from the front to help protect home.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, just like that, even more than D&D, that makes me think of like Blades in the Dark and the flashback mechanic, where you can just be like, "Oh no, we need this thing. Yeah, I did that. I
Right.
definitely spiked the cannons. Yeah, I'll take 2 stress. I spiked those cannons.
Yep. Yep. Tim, you ever gotten drunk on the job?
I have not.
No?
Not once.
How about Dr. Tom?
Nope. Oh, actually, okay. Question: does writing my dissertation mostly buzzed count?
No.
Okay.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, then no.
I
You
guess
can't get fired from
Right.
writing your dissertation.
I guess
Dr.
it's
Klein,
just me
you're the
then.
best advisor. It had nothing to do with you. Grad school is hell.
There was a time while I was working for one of the companies I was working for where another friend of mine randomly got hired there. His name was also Tim, and he is also a bad influence. And he and I used to take our lunch breaks by going down to the bus station and buying a 40 of Old E and 2 cups and a thing of
Oh my
orange
God.
juice, and we would drink Brass Monkeys for lunch like every day.
Oh my god, you disgusting bastard.
Brass Monkeys are fantastic.
The sad part is he still does it.
I still drink Brass Monkeys.
He'll
They're
go
delicious.
buy a 40 Old E, drain half of it, and then just fill it up with OJ.
Yep.
God, it's so bad.
It's so good.
I'll have to try it. Okay, I have had some of that man's concoctions that had no right to taste like anything but sewer water,
Right?
and then woke up the next morning craving death because I had drank so much of it. On Tuesday, I went to the barber to get my beard trimmed down from like 4 or 5 inches to a couple inches because I had a job interview on Wednesday. And while I was there, literally getting my beard trimmed, they started doing rounds of whiskey.
Nice.
It was the weirdest thing.
I've had beers at the bar at a barber shop before, which is nice. Here's a quote for everybody. The benefits arising from moderate use of strong liquor have been experienced in all armies and are not to be disputed. George Washington.
Dispute this.
Right? So if you...
No, I get it. Like, if you're like super stressed after like literal life and death scenarios, and you're trying to blow off some steam with your buddies, like using alcohol as a way to compensate isn't a good thing. But I get why they would say that.
Right.
Well, it's even more than that. It's also the use of alcohol before combat.
Mm-hmm.
Liquid courage, man.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, I think also, I think the operative word there is moderate. It's like, don't get hammered, but if you have enough that you're not even buzzed, but you're not shitting yourself anymore.
Back to our story. At this point, Jones was pumped. They had accomplished the impossible, but that wasn't enough for Jones.
Of course not.
Right?
Of course not.
Nothing's ever enough for us. Quiet ass.
Right? Jones, his new plan was to follow the advice that our old friend Benjamin Franklin had given him before he left France, which was to capture an important British official and then ransom them back in exchange for colonial soldiers that had been forced to serve in the Royal Navy.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty decent plan.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
And Jones, being born near Selkirk Estates, could think of no one better than the Earl of Selkirk in Kirkcudbrightshire. Now this, I have to say, this is my favorite part of the Jones story. We haven't even gotten to Jones's famous quote, and everyone will recognize it. But a lot of people don't recognize that Jones was the one who made the quote. So Jones decided not to go on the kidnapping mission himself. He instead assigned the duty to 2 lieutenants and a boatload of sailors. The Americans approached the Selkirk mansion, and a governess saw them coming.
Just don't let the lantern go out.
Receiving no opposition on their way to the mansion, they just knocked on the door and were greeted by the butler.
Oh my god! No!
Good evening. Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior JPJ?
Right, exactly. How's everyone doing over here? Anybody feeling any yellow fever? Let's go.
Oh, and if we could talk to the Earl, that way we can tie him up and throw him on our boat. That'd be great.
Exactly. Lady Selkirk herself came from the breakfast room to see what all the fuss was about, and invited the American officers into the drawing room, and then told the butler to make tea and find some whiskey for the sailors who were waiting outside.
No, not the alcohol!
Right?
Mistakes were made.
Well, I mean, this is the most British thing.
Yeah, that's true. What? Random strangers? Give them tea and whiskey. Oh, and you, come inside my home.
When they explained blatantly that they had come to kidnap her husband, Lady Selkirk replied that unfortunately, Lord Selkirk was not at home. He was traveling at the time. Wondering what to do, the men suggested that perhaps they could kidnap the young son of the Earl. And Lady Selkirk replied that they would in fact have to kill her first. So, a discussion began, and Lady Selkirk then suggested that so that their mission wouldn't be a complete failure, they could steal the family's silver. And what that means is their fucking silverware, plates, and cups.
Oh my god.
The officers accepted that solution, and Lady Selkirk then ordered the butler to provide the American gentlemen with what they needed. He filled a sack half full of coal, and then filled the top half with silverware, and presented it to the officers. Drinking a toast...
It's half full of coal.
Right.
Absolute best part.
Right?
Oh, looks like the silver won't fill the bag. What else do we have of value we might give you?
The Americans then drank a toast to Lady Selkirk and returned to their ship and presented their captain
Lady Selkirk's the best.
with a sack full of coal and silverware.
Holy shit! He's just like, why did you bring me fucking coal?
I asked for the Earl.
He was at home.
Does this look like an Earl?
Holy shit! Oh my god!
He's all like, did they catch yellow fever? I'm expecting yellow fever. You're not looking too hot
Somebody
yourself.
better have caught yellow fever,
Right, exactly.
or you're gonna catch yellow fever.
I told you guys,
Oh man!
this is my favorite part of the story. Let me dry my eyes a little bit because holy shit.
He's just like some tea and crumpets.
Right, exactly. Perhaps you'd like to burn down the stable in order to prove your point? Like,
Well, unfortunately, we appear to be fresh out of Earls. Silver.
Oh my god.
right? So,
Holy
Jones
shit.
led the Ranger back across the Irish Sea. He was going to make another attempt at the HMS Drake. Still anchored.
At first, you don't succeed.
Right?
Get him!
He was hoping to make another attempt at the Drake. Still anchored off of Carrickfergus.
You think they'd fucking move it?
Right? No one even knows if they were spotted the first time.
Oh,
They
okay.
just kind of
Oh.
and you'll see why. There's an important part that's coming up here.
Well, lighting was so bad back then.
Right,
Like,
it
if
was
you
in the
killed
middle of the
your lights
night.
on your boat.
Right?
Yeah.
At
Like
this
on a
time,
dark night, like Godspeed.
right? At this time, late in the afternoon of April 24th, 1778, the ships, who were roughly equal in firepower, the Drake having 24 4-pound cannons, and the Ranger having 20 6-pound cannons, were going to be engaged in combat. Earlier in the day...
The poundage, just to double check, the poundage is the weight of the cannonball, right?
Right.
Or is it the weight of the
Sure
gun?
about-
Yeah,
I thought it was the weight of the powder.
it's the
Oh, okay.
then in that case the balls are also named after the weight of the powder. I don't know if it's because I mean
Okay.
you have 4-pound balls, which may mean that require 4 pounds of cannonball, but or 4 pounds of powder.
I
Yeah.
have 4-pound balls.
No, I got you. This ship had 20. Earlier in the day, the Americans captured the crew of a reconnaissance boat and learned that the Drake took on dozens of soldiers with the intention of grappling and boarding the Ranger. So Jones wanted to make sure that that did not happen. As the sun rose on April 24th, the crew of the Drake sighted a strange merchant ship flying British colors out on the water.
I know what happens next.
This is a trick that Jones has been employing since he got into British waters. With
He's
no
flying a British flag.
right. Oh yeah.
Oh, that sneaky bastard.
And actually, Jones was also dressed in British naval clothing. Not because he wanted to trick anybody, but he found the British royal uniform was more comfortable than the ones that the Continental Army had provided him. Right?
I love this man.
Right? So there was no activity able to be sighted on board. The captain knew that an American ship had been patrolling these waters, and he was understandably wary. He sent out a small boat to investigate, with an officer, the acting gunner, the ship's true gunner was currently ill, and 6 crew. Jones invited these men on board to speak, and then promptly captured them.
Illusion 100.
Right?
On a side note, if you are worried about a ship and you don't know what's going on there, probably not a good idea to send the guy that fires the guns.
Right? Right? Don't send your master gunner.
Yeah.
So he found out that the Drake was coming for him, and that she had taken on extra men to capture the Ranger. When his boat never returned, the Drake's captain realized who this strange merchant must be, and he would confirm that when a new officer, Lieutenant William Dobbs, came on board that morning with full information about the Ranger. Drake set sail and slowly tacked out to meet the Americans. The wind was against him, and it was slow going for Drake. And as they approached the Ranger, Captain Jones began to taunt him through his speaking trumpet. Attention, dickbags!
God.
Like,
100.
right?
Y'all suck. I'm gonna school you.
So, fun fact, the earliest speaking trumpets were in 1671. So we've had megaphones for 350 years.
Nice.
They are officially
Oh my God.
part of human history. Tim, what do you think would be the best insult to yell from a speaking trumpet?
Oh, shit.
So, in our story, John Paul Jones is slowly watching the Drake approach, and he has his speaking horn out. If you were in that position,
Yeah, based on the time and the fact that it's like 1778 or whatever, I'd probably yell out like next, if you want to catch me, you better get better at pumping your bilges, or
right,
what's that? There's some hole in your sails or something like that.
right. Dr. Tom, do you have an insult that you would like to yell if you were in JPJ's spot?
Perfect. My monthly quota was coming up.
I'm sorry. Any insult that gets yelled needs to have the word jackanape in it.
Jack.
Pump your bilges better, you jackanape!
I would probably yell, "Prepare to get liberated."
Prepare for
fighting.
freedom.
I'm here to fight for liberty, or we're going to liberate the fuck out of you. Or get off my new ship.
Right? Excuse me, but I believe you're standing on my ship.
Oh my god.
All right. So finally, they closed. And Jones quickly turned his ship, unleashing a broadside against the British. Over the next hour and 5 minutes, an intense battle ensued. And it was largely one-sided.
Rip.
Yeah, the British guns were unstable. They tended to lean forward when loaded, and this meant that their shots often missed, and those that hit rarely pierced the Rangers' hull. They were also low on packing paper for their muskets, meaning that each shot had to be painstakingly loaded individually. The Americans, on the other hand, were well prepared and kept up a dizzying blade of fire.
Of course they're prepared.
Right?
School's some fools.
They could have a paperclip and a piece of and like an ice pick, and they'd be like, "Cool, we're good."
This is like 1775 MacGyver.
Right?
Don't fuck with MacGyver.
After losing her captain, lieutenant, and many of the crew, the Drake finally surrendered. But her colors had long since blown away by the American firepower. Her acting master instead waved his hat and screamed for surrender over the din of battle. The Americans had just taken their first military prize in British waters, and they returned to France with the captured vessel. Yeah. So,
America!
yeah, the Drake was now in the U.S.'s hands. Jones' crew, though, when they got back to France, didn't stick around. There wasn't much money to be made when terrorizing the British. The second in command, a man who went by the name of Simpson, had been leading the crew. Right. He's like the one person who crosses John Paul Jones that doesn't get yellow fevered. Like he had been leading the crew much like they were a privateer ship instead of a Navy crew. Jones, right, had Simpson court-martialed and detained. This led him to needing a new ship. So the French and our old friend, Ben motherfucking Franklin, had just the thing.
So why did he need a new ship?
Because he didn't, like, it had been damaged a bit in the last battle. He didn't have a crew, and he wanted to get back out there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and...
he didn't want to wait for refitting.
He needed a new ship basically funded.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So they gave Jones his newest ship, the 42-gun U.S. Bonhomme Richard, which Jones chose this name in honor of Ben Franklin. Translated from French, Bonhomme Richard is Poor Richard, the name of the famous almanac, written by Benjamin Franklin.
That's awesome. Ben Franklin's like, all right, y'all see what this dude can do with the sloop. Let's give him a real boat.
Right?
And just fucking watch.
The ship was formerly the Duc de Duras, and it was a refit East Indian merchant vessel. Jones, now Commodore Jones, was back in the fight. The ship was big, but it had its problems. The crew that they managed to get for him were not the best, although they served Jones very faithfully. His crew was made up of unsavory agents, former criminals, cast-off military men, and privateers.
In other words, he had the saltiest crew alive.
He had a ramshackle crew.
Yes!
Yeah. Which
the D&D campaign lives.
Right. With a man like John Paul Jones, you couldn't ask for a better crew. Right? Like,
right, yeah. It's like a bunch of dudes who are like, if you're an asshole, we're going to whip on you. And he's like, I will be such an asshole you won't want to. You want the yellow fever? Do you?
Right? So they got his, they got the Mighty Ducks together.
Oh my god.
So the guns on the ship were given freely to the Continental Navy. But that's because they were cast-offs from French gun makers. So,
okay.
yeah, they were ones that they were all like, these are not the finest of cannons. So they put them in the back. And we're all like, hey, give those to the Americans.
They won't know the difference. Whatever,
Right?
who cares?
So Jones sailed the Bonhomme Richard out on June 19th of 1779, along with a squadron of ships, including the USS Alliance, which was a 36-gun frigate, the French warships Pallas, which was a captured British 32-gun frigate, the Vengeance, a 12-gun British brig, and the cutter Le Cerf, a complement which had a complement of troop ships accompanying it.
Basically, he's now in charge of a fleet as a commodore.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this ragtag fucking cobbled together ship with a bunch of shitty guns and the worst crew they could find in command of these other ships that I'm guessing were a higher in quality, so to speak.
But the big problem was that the USS Alliance was the ship itself was owned by the captain. It was he was a US privateer.
Ah, okay.
The other two were French warships, and the Vengeance was very small. The Vengeance and the cutter Le Cerf. So the voyage resulted in no contact with the British ships. But in August, the fleet set sail to the North Sea and then captured 16 more British merchant ships along with their cargoes. Right?
Holy Christ!
After returning to port for repairs, the Alliance and the Bonhomme Richard collided in a storm, so they were forced to be repaired even longer.
Right, Bill.
Yep.
Somebody's getting yellow fever for that.
Right. So this one's just a tie question, right? In Jones's hunting area, what would be the worst kind of merchant to be?
A merchant?
Right. The proper answer is British, but I was just saying, like, what do you think would make him smell you from farthest away? Like
spices.
If you were a spice merchant, he would be able to tell you that you were there.
Actually, also because like spices had a really, really, really good value to weight ratio, didn't they?
Oh, they had an amazing value to weight ratio.
And that's exactly the kind of shit you want to steal as a privateer captain.
Yeah, from what I understand,
weigh your ships down and slow it down.
Yeah, from what I understand, even that late in history, spices, especially depending on the spice, were still weighed out by their weight in gold.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So you could also just jack gold straight out.
Well, the problem is that gold weighs a lot more than spices.
Right.
So a pound of spices doesn't actually take up that much room, whereas a pound of gold does. It's bulky.
Wait, no, because gold is super dense.
But it's not malleable.
That's fair. You could tuck spices wherever. I don't know, though. I still feel like because gold is like hideously dense that it would take up less space pound for pound.
When you were a gold vessel, you would have to move the piles of gold brick and bullion and stuff like that throughout the ship in different spots so that you didn't weigh your ship in one direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah,
but with spices, it doesn't. So here's the big difference between gold and spices is gold. You have gold bricks generally, or ingots, or whatever. You can't really break that apart.
Yeah.
Spices. Oh, I've got spices. I'm gonna put that in this bag and then tuck it into this little alcove here, and then this little alcove here. Oh, it's time to sell it all. Pour it all back in the barrel.
That's fair.
I think ultimately it doesn't really matter what kind of merchant you were. If you were British, it didn't matter.
You up.
Because, as I said before, the sea's big. He just attacked any merchant that hobed into his field of vision that was flying a British flag.
Yep. Yeah. He just took anybody he could.
Yeah. I don't think it really mattered what they were carrying.
Right. So, September 23rd, 1779, the small fleet sighted the British Baltic Fleet of 41 vessels under the protection of the 44-gun frigate, the HMS Serapis, and the sloop of war, the Countess of Scarborough.
Oh no, I'm scared of sloops.
Right, which was a 22-gun ship of the line. At the time of the battle, the Serapis was armed with 44 guns. 20 18-pounders, which is insane. 20 9-pounders and 4 6-pounders. The Serapis, being named after the god Serapis in Greek and Egyptian mythology, the technology of that ship was very much above the older Bonhomme Richard. But Jones did not give one fuck.
Do it!
At 6 o'clock p.m., the Bonhomme Richard engaged the Serapis head-on and attacked the Countess of Scarborough, and the Pallas, which was one of the other ships, attacked the Countess of Scarborough in what became the Battle of Flamborough Head. The USS Alliance, pieces of shit, did not engage the British. They instead fired on the Bonhomme Richard.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So when the
Someone's
battle,
getting yellow fever.
right?
Yeah.
when the battle,
So his fleet fired on him, you said, yeah?
just
Double
the
check.
Alliance, the USS Alliance, the US privateer.
That motherfucker?
Right. When the
Fuck
battle
with
began.
JPJ.
Yep. When the
Yep.
battle began, they left. During the battle, they came back, and Jones thought, "Oh, he turned around. He wasn't a piece of shit." And then he turned, broadsided the Bon Richard, and left again.
Oh, you done fucked up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey,
You done
Brutus.
fucked up.
Like,
Yeah.
exactly. Judas, no.
JPJ gonna get you.
Right.
JPJ gonna fucking get you.
Right. We just found JPJ's Brutus, or his Judas. You know, like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
JPJ.
this action resulted in a court-martial for Lindias, the captain of the Alliance, when they returned to France. But Bonhomme Richard rounded Serapis's port quarter and fired 2 of its cannons, which exploded below deck, killing many of the gun crew. In Jones's favor, Midshipman Fanning, who was one of the guys serving with him, succeeded in eliminating the British sharpshooters from the top sail of the Bonhomme Richard. So they managed to take care of their sharpshooters. So now the only people with sharpshooters were the Bonhomme Richard. So Jones was forced to make a tricky maneuver and outsmart the much better gunned Serapis, because at this point,
Right.
he almost has no guns left, barely any.
Yeah.
Right.
His cannons blew up. Yeah.
Right. 2 of them blew up and
Yeah.
killed a ton of people in the gunnery rooms.
Fuck.
So he raised his sails and began to flee the battle.
Yeah.
The Serapis took the bait. They pursued the Bonhomme Richard, and Jones used this maneuver to lure the ship out from all of the chaos of the battle, and then turned sharply so that he could ram directly into the Serapis.
Oh no.
Right?
Nice.
Here we go. This is where you guys will all go, "Oh, John Paul Jones, I get it." Right. After the collision, Jones was hailed by the Serapis. The first mate of the Serapis said, "Has your ship struck?" To which Captain Jones answered with a quote that would ring throughout history: "I have not yet begun to fight."
Hell yeah. JPJ!
At that point, the 2 vessels became locked together via grappling hooks for another 2 hours.
shit.
Jones utilized prisoners from the hold, British prisoners, to work the pumps to keep the ship afloat.
Holy shit.
Right? One member of Jones' crew was able to leap from sail to sail. Now aboard the Serapis, that plucky crew member, who I was unable to find the name of. I searched for at least 2 hours just looking for this guy's name. That crew member was able to lob a grenade from the sail into the one place you don't want to
storage.
have a grenade, the black powder storage.
Wow.
My butt just clenched real hard.
Right?
Oh, man.
Oh my god.
Jones and his crew's actions wore down the enemy to the point of collapse, and the Serapis, on fire, caused the British to finally surrender by striking their colors.
It's like, no guns, no problem. We got this.
Right.
Jones' crew put out the fire and took stock of the Richard. He decided to transfer his crew to the British ship, while the Bonhomme Richard was allowed to sink. According to
They sank my ship. I needed a new one. What was I gonna do?
It sunk on September 25th, 1779, despite the attempts, right? Despite the valiant attempts to save the gallant ship. But that's okay. Jones had the Serapis now. Right? And he sailed
A technologically advanced
Right?
44 gun. Yeah.
It's like, we tried to kill him and we only made him stronger.
right.
Grand Theft Naval.
Right? But that's okay. Jones had the Serapis now, and he sailed to the port in the United Provinces of Holland. Fun fact, at this point, JPJ's at 45-ish ships captured, destroyed, or whatever, and the British against JPJ has won.
I wouldn't even say one. I'd go more 0. Like, yeah, they sank one, but it's a net gain.
Right?
Yeah, he was just like,
zero.
fuck it, I got a nicer boat now.
Right?
Go. It's
But this is just some stats to show you guys. 45-ish times the maximum being, around 100 hours per ship. That's 4,500 hours of ship versus 100 hours of ship that the British have caused JPJ in problems.
that man's KDR is insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and I'm sure he's not done.
Well,
No!
by the end of the
He's just
war,
like, keep the stats, bro.
right? By the end of the war, Jones was considered to be a nautical boogeyman by the British. This image that we've got right here is an image that was supposedly of him.
I take it this is British propaganda.
British propaganda, yeah. Paul Jones, the pirate.
Is propaganda supposed to make you look awesome?
Apparently, right? After the war, he was out of a job. So instead of retiring, he joined the Russian Navy. where he then received the Order of St. Anne for valor and distinguished service in the military. In 1792, Jones was appointed U.S. consul to treat with the Day of Algiers and for the release of American captives. Before Jones was able to fulfill that appointment, he was found dead, aged 45, lying face down in his bed in his third-floor Paris apartment, number 19 Rue de Tournon, on July 18th, 1792. The cause of death was interstitial nephritis.
I wanted you to say yellow fever
Right.
fucking like the yellow fever giveth, the yellow fever taketh away.
Interstitial nephritis is a condition that is most often caused due to allergic drug reactions or infections. A small procession of servants, friends, and loyal family walked his body 4 miles for a burial. He was buried in Paris at the St. Louis Cemetery, which belonged to the French royal family. 4 years later, France's revolutionary government sold the property, and the cemetery was forgotten. The area was then later used as a garden, a place to dispose of dead animals, and where gamblers would bet on animal fights. Which is
what the fuck?
Fucking metal. Like
that seems very fitting for John Paul Jones's final resting place. I'm not gonna lie.
It's not done.
What?
Oh. JPJ's got one more card up his sleeve, bro.
What?
In 1905, Jones's remains were identified by U.S. Ambassador to France, General Horace Porter, who had searched for 6 years to track down the body using faulty copies of Jones's burial record. After Jones's death, Frenchman Perrault-François Simonier donated 460 francs to mummify the body. It was preserved in alcohol and interred in a lead coffin. In the event that the United States decides to claim his remains, they might be more easily identified. Porter knew what to look for in his search. With the aid of an old map of Paris, Porter's team, which include anthropologist Louis Capitan, identified the site of the former St. Louis cemetery for alien Protestants. Sounding probes were used to search for lead coffins, and 5 coffins were ultimately exhumed. The third, unearthed on April 7th, 1905, was later identified through meticulous post-mortem examination by doctors Capiton and Georges Papilliot as being that of Jones.
Right, buddy.
John Paul Jones was given an honorary pardon in 1999 by the Port of Whitehaven for his raid on the town.
You know what, dude? We're cool.
Right?
Oh my god.
His body is now currently entombed in the U.S. Naval Academy.
Oh my god. Wow. I'm gonna piss myself.
But no, with these last 2 shrines, this is the tomb of John Paul Jones at the Academy. Full marble pillars, and this coffin is intense.
Yeah, like
That's
the
like,
fake
don't open that
barnacles
or
on it, and
right?
on the backs of dolphins and shit.
Right?
If you open that coffin, you will die of yellow fever.
Right?
Exactly.
I'd like to point out,
Oh my
guess whose
god.
body isn't buried at the United States Naval Academy? Fucking Hopkins.
You fucked, Hopkins.
You're wrecked, Hopkins. Exactly. Well, everybody,
Crap.
that is the story of John Paul Jones, formerly John Paul Jr., finally Commodore John Paul Jones.
Oh man.
Oh
From
my
a-
god.
From a gardener's son to a Commodore in both the U.S. and Russian navies.
Yeah. Still sailing.
Right, exactly.
I was absolutely like every fiber of my being expecting you to be like, they found his body, but it wasn't his body at all.
Right, exactly.
And then just like another 20 years of rampaging.
Right.
Woo.
But that is the story of the American Revolutionary War hero who decided that he wasn't fit, just waiting for the British to come to him, and he brought the war to the British.
You know,
America.
I'd be very interested to see how many other captains did that.
Mm-hmm.
If there were any other American vessels sailing in British waters at the time, or if it was just him.
Right? When I had originally planned this episode, I didn't think that I was going to be able to find as much content as I found on John Paul Jones.
JPJ.
I did.
Harumph.
Originally, today's episode was going to be John Paul Jones and the Emu Wars of Australia.
They're so funny.
Episode number 2 will be the Emu Wars.
Although,
we will be covering.
I'm guessing we'll have to throw something else in there with the Emu Wars. I don't think that's 2 hours of coverage.
I didn't think
we
so.
We got a JPJ.
Right.
He proved us.
The amount of
Those
shit I
emus
found
are
on
some
this.
lucky bastards.
Right. But we'll figure it
Okay.
out, right? They're definitely going to be doing some of the Emu Wars next episode. If it's not long enough, I'll find another topic as well. But
Right.
I think that's a real good first episode.
Solid. It's going to be
shit.
hard to beat it.
I almost want to name this the Yellow Fever Podcast. Like, although taken completely out of context, it's not gonna work.
I don't even care.
That's number 2 on the top 10 on anime betrayals. Like, that's, you get in trouble with Yellow Fever. So
Stop making me worried I'm gonna piss myself.
that's the point of this show, though. And the best part is, right, we're making these dumb jokes, we're talking about murder and stuff like that. Everybody at home is hearing the fucking softest fucking classical music just playing in the background.